Well, hands down, this is probably the most spectacular sunset I witnessed in 2025. And I gotta say, in general, it's one of the greatest displays of light I've ever seen. And what a blessing it was to be at Milford Sound, one of the most iconic landscape locations in the world. This was one of the images I made on that afternoon, and it was quite a pain in the butt to put together. So in this video, I wanna share with you guys some of my favorite images I made this year in 2025, but I wanna actually give you a glimpse behind the scenes at how I put some of these together, but more importantly, give you guys some tips and considerations that you can apply to your landscape photography. So sit back, get comfortable, make yourself a warm drink, and let's go over some of my favorite images made this year. Well, it's been another big year. I want to thank you guys so much for your support of the channel. And I want to thank everyone who came out on a workshop, or maybe those of you who purchased some of my online tutorials. I really appreciate your support and look forward to keep sharing more in the channel moving forward. So I've got the laptop here and I've pulled up quite a few still images. I'm going to run through some and just give you guys a few thoughts and tips along the way. I'm going to start off with this one. You might remember when I created this video, creating this image, going for a bit of a hike and following up this scrambly edge of the mountain. So my main tip here is a compositional one. One thing I'm always looking for with composition is balance. You would have heard me mention this time and time again. And I always consider the weight of an image, the weight of the frame and the key subject matters there. And I'm trying to make sure that there isn't a significant imbalance. And if there is an imbalance, it's there for a reason to maybe push or pull the eye. But in this case, we've got a pretty classic example of where I'm counterbalancing the scene, primarily with that foreground object being on the lower left. And then on the top right, we have the mountain. So that's counterbalancing things evenly. And then in the middle is the waterfall. So a really wide perspective, 12 millimeters, using foreground to create depth near and far, and then balancing things out. Another favorite was shot earlier on in the year with my friend Dylan, and I took him to this canyon, which is quite an iconic place now these days. But if you get your timing right, at the right time of year in the right weather conditions, there's a very, very brief window where you can get the light come through into the canyon. And it creates such a spectacular display of light and atmosphere. So this is looking up, and again, if you consider the weight of the image, see how I've got the dark shapes on the left and then dark shapes on the right. So framing things up, and then where is the main subject, the light and the waterfall through in that centralized area. Another thing I like to use is darkness, and I use shade and blacks to draw the eye toward the light. And most of the time you'll see in my images, where the light is, where the brightest portion is, that's typically where the main subject matter is. So I'm using the shade and the darker tones to lead the eye to that point. So using dark tones on your edges is a very effective way to draw the eye to a particular part of the frame. Here's an aerial image I made at the start of the year. I didn't really shoot many aerials this year, but when I get up these days in the air, it's something that I really cherish. I have shot a lot of aerials across the last decade or so, and a lot of that is learning to maximize your time in the air, make the most of it and not waste your time, because you're literally paying per minute. So here I'm got close to the mountains to create a sense of depth. So instead of having all the mountains further in the distance, I made sure that we got lower. Communication with the pilot is critical. So I got low to that mountain in the foreground, and now we can see that progression of mountains being quite large and then getting smaller through the frame. You can also see the water of the lake being quite wide and then getting narrow. So there's a lot of factors here where we can see a sense of depth. And the main factor is the diminishing perspective, where we're seeing subject matter large and then getting smaller as it goes through into the distance. This forest photo was captured in the backcountry, and I was just taking my time following a small stream. And when you do that, when you're in the forest, it really does pay to slow down. It's one of the main tips that I shared with you guys this year. When I came across this tree, I just thought, wow, what a beautiful creature. This was tricky because I didn't have much on the right-hand side of the frame to balance things out, but I had enough light there that I hoped that it was, enough to just draw the eye through, and then we just enjoyed the tree. One thing I consider is flow, visual flow, and that will typically be with something like a waterfall and definitely trees. Most trees, they're not perfectly straight, especially here in the beech forest. So whenever I have these arms coming out in a certain direction, then I'll offset the tree from center and use the directional flow of the tree to bring the eye back to that centralized area. I don't want to push the viewer's eye out of the frame. So you can see here in this case, I've offset the tree to the left because it's leaning to the right. So put it to the left and then it brings the eye back into the frame, and then that's where we have the nice pleasing light. This one here, funny enough, this has ended up being a real personal favorite from the year, but I remember when I created this and we filmed a video of going to capture this photo, this frame was more of like a consolation. I remember going up to, we took the boat along the lake and we tried to access this waterfall. The waterfall was really tricky to photograph, and then it was on the way back and I had my son with me and we just happened to jump in the creek. I created this image, and it wasn't until I got home and processed it and then I started to really enjoy it more and more. But at the time, I remember thinking I enjoyed it, but I just didn't really think it'd be something I'd even keep or even process. And as it turns out, like I said, it's one of my favorites of the year. I just really like the greens and the different shades of greens that you get in particular parts of the forest. And I just felt like this area we were in showcased that really well. Talking about compositional balance again, see how I've got the fern in the lower left, and then on the right hand side we have those large cascades, so counterbalancing each other, and then a diminishing perspective. The creek is wide, progressively gets narrow. That's where we hit the waterfall, the nice light, the fern trees, etc. I released a masterclass this year on intimate landscape photography, so just talking about not capturing the big grand scene, but looking down at those finer details which comprise the grander landscape. One of the big tips that I express in this course is when we're considering these subjects, there's a few things you can consider, but one of the main ones is a sense of movement or direction, texture and contrast. And when I say contrast, I mean contrasting light, contrasting colors, or even contrasting textures. So here's a few intimate images that I made kind of demonstrating that. Now these are looking down at rocks, looking down at water. These little details are all around us, and it just pays to really slow down when you're out in nature. And I've always enjoyed capturing these more intimate scenes. It's just not something that probably moves me emotionally as much as the grand landscape. But it was really fun this year to maybe just slow down a little further and really consider these types of frames. So the key tip is contrast, contrasting light, contrasting texture, and consider visual flow. Can we compose the scene in a way that makes the eye want to travel around a little instead of being so static? And that's how I feel like you make these images a little more impactful. So I went back to Australia this year to visit some family, and it was really nice to bring the camera, but I didn't have any obligations this time, but I was inspired. And one of the things that inspired me was the gum trees. So I really spent a few sessions getting amongst the gum trees, which are really quite tricky to photograph because the Australian bush is so chaotic. I just slowed down and reapplied the same principles I use here in the New Zealand rainforest, looking for some harmony amongst chaos, primarily looking for larger trees that kind of demand your attention. And then the other main factor was going out when the light was good. I think many years ago I didn't really do that with the forest. I'll just go out randomly and then wonder why I couldn't make a good photo. But in this particular case, I went out during the golden hours, and it definitely makes things a lot easier when there is less light. And when the light is there, it's quite soft and pleasing. So these are some of the images I made of the Australian bush. And the other thing I did was return to one of the old iconic seascape locations, Cathedral Rocks. I really enjoyed shooting a sunrise here with my daughter. It was quite special because this location this is my old stomping ground. This is where I kind of learnt photography and just went back so many times. And my very first workshops were taught here. So it's a place that holds a special spot in my heart, and to go back there with my daughter was, it's quite surreal. It's quite a surreal moment. We got an amazing sunrise. Now, one of the key factors here when you're shooting a sunrise or sunset looking directly at the sun itself, in my opinion, generally the best time to shoot is when the sun is just on the horizon. Just before sunrise, you can get really good color in the cloud, but you're not getting that light on the landscape. and then bang, just as the sun comes up, now you can get, as you see here in the foreground, that magical light hitting the foreground. And that, in my opinion, makes the landscape more three-dimensional because we have more tonality. To me, it's not so much about the color in the sky, it's more about the light and the way that the sun can just pop up and then start to paint golden hues in different areas. So just keep that in mind when you go and photograph a sunrise or sunset. I was able to get out in the fjords a few times this year, into the southern fjords, and this is a yearly workshop that I run going out in the fjords. This was one of the images we made of one of my favorite areas, and this morning the atmosphere and light was incredible, but it was very fleeting, very brief. You can see here where I've used the wide angle lens and I've applied those same principles of the diminishing perspective, getting some foreground matter nice and close. So we've got a big to small visual flow, and we've also got that dark to light. This morning was one of those ones. So it's really, really memorable. So here we go, the sunset of the year. Honestly, I've seen my fair share of sunsets, that's for sure. And this particular one, looking at the forecast, I thought, geez, we might actually get a good sunset here at Milford Sound. It's going to be worth hanging around. What you want for color like this is a sky full of cloud, mid-level cloud and high-level cloud. And then on the horizon, we need a little sliver of no cloud, so the light can actually break through and underlight the cloud. It's really hard in the mountains to see if that gap's there or not. So that's where the satellite imagery can come in handy. To cut a long story short, yes, all the ingredients were there. There was the gap on the horizon, and bang, the sky just lit up. It was absolutely incredible. I took the opportunity to just try something different. Obviously, being a local, I've photographed Milford hundreds of times, but never in such good light like this. So I've always looked at this tree that's on the shoreline. It's been there for over 10 years, this tree, and it's got the interesting roots at the end of it. And I went in there with the 12mm lens, and yeah, I just thought I'd try to maybe use that in order to frame up Mitre Peak, and that's kind of what I've done here. So I'm basically using the tree roots as a natural frame in order to bring the emphasis to where the best light is and where Mitre Peak is, the main mountain. This shot was tricky though, because I had to focus stack the scene. Now, someone asked a question recently about focus stacking. When do you focus stack? How do you know how many frames to shoot? You need to focus stack when your f-stop just can't give you the coverage to get the image sharp in a single exposure. Maybe you're at f14 and it's sharp where you focused in the 80% of the scene, but then it's just soft in the background, or maybe it's soft right in the foreground. Then you might try f18 or even f20 if you want to, and you're still finding you just can't get the whole image sharp in a single frame. The two things you can do now. Number one is to step back slightly. You're just way too close to that foreground. Step back, and then you'll probably find that you can now get everything sharp in a single exposure. If you step back and the composition has changed too much from what you're after, well, now you actually just need to stay close and do the focus stack. Generally, you'll find that 3 frames is enough, but it depends what the f-stop is. If you're at f2.8, you're gonna obviously need way more frames than if you're at f16. So typically what I do is still leave the f-stop quite high. f11 generally, maybe f13, f14, somewhere around there. And then I have on the Sony a7R5, like inbuilt focus stacking, so it will shift the focus for me as I press the shutter. And generally I find 3 to 4 frames. If you're shooting manually, the more the merrier. Just do 3, 4, 5, 6 frames. Think of this as a puzzle, and when you get home, you don't want to be short of the puzzle pieces. So just shoot as many as you think. What you want to do is make sure that your final frame has the distance sharp, and the first frame obviously has the immediate foreground sharp, and you're just getting that coverage in between. So this one was put together from memory. I think it was 3 frames to get this one. The trickiest part though, it wasn't so much about the focus stacking, it's about the light. When you have such a colorful sunrise or sunset like this, it's quite tricky because you expose for the highlights. This is single exposure as far as the dynamic range is concerned. But when you get back, you can really butcher these shots. And one of the ways you can stuff up your sunrise or sunset photos is if you're making the shadows too bright. The second you do that, that defies logic, and you remove that natural sense of depth. So when I processed this one, it took quite a few passes over on that edit across multiple days. And these passes, when I say a pass, it's just when I open it up and adjust it. It's just a few minutes. But I just found it was too bright, too bright, too bright, and I didn't get the result I was after until I really darkened down the foreground and actually had dark shadows, because when you're looking at the backlit subject matter like that, you've got to have those darks in there. So just keep that in mind. Darks should be dark, and then even your highlights should be highlights as well. And if you get away from that, you start to get that kind of cartoon AI type result, which is something obviously we definitely want to stay away from. When it comes to focus stacking, this was another frame that I focus stacked, and this was shot tighter, around 35 millimeters, but I just found at 35 mil, I just definitely couldn't get everything sharp all the way through because I was quite close to that foreground, that fresh snow. This was a lot easier though to capture and process because it is a side light, it's not a backlight. So it's more muted pastel colors, a lot easier to work with than the sunset at Milford Sound. The last images I'll share here are from a really stormy day at Milford Sound. If I can see a huge weather front coming in, really heavy rain and really strong wind, then I'll try to head into Milford or just into the fjords in general, somewhere into the national park. On this particular day, I went into Milford and I was on the cruise, and I was running a group workshop. So I was really excited to get the guys there on these conditions, but man, this one was on another level. So the wind gusts were picking up at over 130 kilometers an hour, and it was violent, but that violence is so inspiring. What the landscape does, watching these waterfalls just get blown up into the sky. Honestly, it's powerful. But this, like I said, it was on another level to the point where it was unnerving, but this is truly where I feel the most inspired with the camera, when I have that reverence for nature and even a hint of fear. That's where I just feel so alive and so emotionally connected to the subject matter. So these are some of the images from that one particular day. Quite rare for me to go out and do something I've done many, many times before. I've cruised in Milford over 150 times easily. It might even be up around 200 now. But like I said, on this particular day, things just got taken to a whole new level. And that's why I'm always excited to go in there, because you never know with nature what it's going to do. It always keeps things interesting. So it pays to just go out, when, even if it's for a sunrise or sunset, whatever it may be, pay attention to the weather. That's the biggest thing you can do as a landscape photographer. React to the weather. Don't even pre-visualize the actual photograph you're trying to make. Just go out when the light and the weather looks interesting, and then see what catches your eye. I want to thank you guys so much for supporting the channel this year. All your likes, your comments, every time you share a video, that really helps the channel to keep growing. And if the channel is growing, it just gets a little bit more sustainable for me to keep posting these videos for you guys each week. I've got a lot more lined up and ready to go. I look forward to making some new ones for you guys as well. If there's anything you want to see in particular, please let me know in the comments below, because I'm all ears and I want to help you guys with your photography. I really love the community here on YouTube, and it's you guys that are making it so special with all your support and encouraging words, and you're letting me know that I'm helping you guys with your photography. And that's the whole point of this channel, right? It's to help you guys and it's to inspire you guys. And I want to thank you for just letting me share my journey with you, because not all these videos are about, you know, quick hacks and quick tips and the success stories. It's often just me doing what I do, going out and doing photography, which I've been doing for many, many years now. It's just that I happen to bring the camera along and maybe show you a bit of behind the scenes. So thank you for letting me share not just the highs, but also the lows and everything in between. And, you know, something I was thinking about recently was, we don't always want success in life, whatever your artistic outlet may be. You really need those trials and actual failures to learn from. And when we learn from them, that's when we actually then can progress and grow and move forward. So if you guys are maybe plateauing a little bit with your photography, maybe struggling with certain things, just embrace that, because those are the things you can actually learn from. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there, and I hope to see you in a new video soon. Cheers.